자, 그럼 지금부터 질의응답
So we
갖겠습니다.
are going to have a Q&A session. First, I will ask some questions to the first speaker, Director General Jung Hee-kwon. There are 3 questions we have received in advance. First question is, how do you plan to address the growing inequality and alienation of vulnerable population when establishing science and ICT policies? So, Director General Jung. We have the master plan for science and ICT policies, which is the 4th Science and ICT Basic Plan. And the purpose of this plan is to realize a warm and inclusive society. We want to make sure that we improve the quality of life of the vulnerable population, and we are also implementing policies to address the digital divide. For example, we have developed, or we are developing AI care robot for senior citizens suffering from senile dementia. And we are also working with the local libraries and citizen centers to provide digital literacy related training. We are also making sure that people have access to science and ICT education. We are expanding science education for students from low-income families, and we are also working with the Museum of Science so that we can have these students to have science-related experience. And the 5th basic plan is now being established, and inclusiveness will be the main key word. And we will leverage science and technology in order to strengthen social safety net for the vulnerable citizens. Thank you very much for your answer. So you are working on another.
두 번째 질문 이어서 드리겠습니다.
This is the second question. So we understand that in Korea we have very active private sector R&D activities. What is the role of the private sector R&D vis-a-vis the government's R&D expenditure? Korean R&D is estimated to worth around 100 trillion. The government spends about 30 trillion, and the private sector spends about 70 trillion Korean won. If you look at the government R&D investment, we have a mid and long-term R&D investment strategies, and there are different roles played by the government sector and the private sector depending on the industry. In key industries, we are seeing a lot of private sector investment, and the objective is to increase global competitiveness. And the government is more geared to making investments for developing next generation and core technologies for future industries because there is a high likelihood of failure. We do not expect a lot of private sector investment. So the government provides short-term R&D support, and we also provide incentives to attract private sector investment. For the public infrastructure and for areas that is closely linked to quality of environment or quality of life, we do not expect large-scale investment from the private sector, so that's why the government is leading the R&D investment. Also, the government is leading the R&D investment support so that we can strengthen the capabilities of main agents innovation. Thank you very much for your answer. Now, last question to Mr. Zhang. What are some of the differences between the 4th Science and ICT Basic Plan and the 5th Basic Plan? So, Mr. Zhang. We see various challenges, and technology and science can play an important role to solve all those problems. We are seeing acceleration in digital transformation because of COVID-19, and there are global issues such as climate change. If you look at the draft 5th Basic Plan, we aim to address all those social issues, and we also plan to achieve national innovation, economic recovery, and survival of the nation and the humanity. Compared to the 4th plan, innovation is highlighted in leveraging science and technology to solve social issues, and the scope of what we want to achieve has expanded. Not just the development of science and ICT, but further advancement of science and ICT for innovation will be pursued in the 5th Basic Plan.
기술 측면에 있어서도 주요
To
국의
actual technologies, we will review policies of other countries and domestic overseas R&D status and the local R&D capabilities, and will select some key technologies that we will promote and nurture. So we understand the fifth basic plan is now being devised. Mr. Zhang provided additional information on the fifth basic plan. Please kindly refer to the details so that we can have stronger cooperation.
국장님께 질문이
I'll move on to Director General of ICT Policy, Mr. Do-hyun Kang. You have presented on the Digital New Deal, so we have more questions. We have 4 in total.
먼저 첫 번째 질문은
First, is there a discussion platform on the issue of human-centered AI addressing basic rights and values such as privacy, dignity, and human autonomy
플랫폼이 있습니까?
in Korea?
이런 질문이 들어와 있습니다. 답변 부탁드릴까요, 국장님?
Please go ahead.
기술 발전에 있어서의 성과와
There are achievements from technological development and negative side effects from that.
가장 접근하기 어려운 분야가
And one of the most difficult area to access is AI, as I know of.
사회적 합의가 중요하고
That is why social consensus is all the more important for this domain.
플랫폼은
And just
분명한
like was mentioned in the question, a discussion platform would be very important.
한국 정부는 인공지능과 관련된 법과
Regarding AI-related legislation,
작년부터
the Korean government,
전문가와
starting from last year,
또 국민들이 함께 할 수 있는
encouraged the participation of experts and the public
정비를 위한 운영단을 만들었고
in our working group on AI legislation.
G7에서 이야기한 윤리 가이드라인은
And the ethical guideline by the OECD and G7
윤리
will be made more specific to
있습니다.
has been made more specific to come up with Korea's ethical standard on AI. Going forward, we will enable more comprehensive participation in discussion forums, and next year,
또 온라인 포럼까지도
online forums joined by the public will be shared by everyone, so we can discuss not only technological development, as well, but also the negative side effects, including the important issue of ethics.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much.
AI 시대에 사람과
We're living in the era of AI, so we need to think about various programs to enable the coexistence of people and AI, and I think the government is getting ready for this. The next question is regarding digital inclusiveness. I think this is similar to the previous question to Mr. Chung. Here's the question. During ICT policymaking, what are your considerations to address increasing inequality and marginalization of the digitally illiterate?
정보 격차 문제는 어느 나라나
Gap
고민을
is
할
experienced
수밖에 없는
by
문제인 것 같습니다.
any country.
과거에는
It is a serious issue.
격차가
In the past, the root cause was income gap, but going forward,
사회
digital gap
경쟁력 강화에
in terms of social integration and strengthened competitiveness will be the key aspect. In our pursuit of the Digital New Deal, the Korean government has making policies to resolve the digital gap as well.
국민의 정보 교육을 위해
First of all, to provide
전국 천여 개
digital education nationwide,
교육센터를 운영하고
we are operating a training center for digital skills, 1,000 of them nationwide, and we are also building Wi-Fi networks to traffic facilities, and in school areas of rural regions, we are strengthening telecommunication infrastructure to provide equal level of education nationwide and raise the access to digital devices. Recently,
각종 키오스크가 장애인과 고령층의
kiosks that have been increasingly used in society must be more friendlier to the disabled and the elderly. So we are coming up with programs for that. Yes, it is imperative that everyone has a fair share of the benefits from digital transformation. So the third question is, what is the general principle in Sandbox policies aimed at promoting innovation? Because for IT companies, deregulation would be very important. This would be about improving regulations.
프로 선수나 어른이 뛰는 운동장이 아닌 아직은 어린.
We do have elite sportsmen, but also amateur sportsmen, and also the laymen. And Sandbox is where we allow all of these people to play a fair game together. So we have startups that have recently started their businesses that have great ideas, but find it difficult to go global or start a new business. So Sandbox is the policy for these people and companies. It is about allowing first and regulating later on. We reformed the regulatory system to allow new products and technology to be launched in the market first and regulated if necessary later on. So even when existing law bans a new offering, provided that the offering doesn't threaten lives and safety, we at least set up a special measure to permit testing or demonstration to confirm its commercial viability. Thank you very much.
Of course, as was mentioned, we want to make sure that we create an environment where companies can freely engage in their business activities. Many countries around the world are nurturing startup companies, and the last question is related to startup nurture. What are some of the tests that the government has to pursue in order to nurture startup companies by young people?
So in any country, the youth are the leaders of the future. The future of Korea also lies on the shoulders of our youth, and Korea's competitiveness lies in the competitiveness of our youth startups. Until now, the Korean government have been providing various support programs for startups and venture companies. And one of the lessons that we have learned from the experience is first, these startups need to think about going global from the initial stage to succeed. And secondly, we need to set up a safety net so the youth won't be afraid of making mistakes. And third, we need to help peer groups to share and collaborate, exchanging ideas and information in different domains. That would be the platform for success. So taking this in mind, the Korean government recently announced new youth support programs to succeed in the global market. We plan to expand exchanges for the youth with overseas businesses and universities, and to help them be bold, we are going to make the qualification for government support programs more lenient and also build the digital youth residence where the youth will be given priority to move into start up new businesses and live. At the same time, to encourage information exchange, we will establish a foundation comprised of experienced digital business leaders to share know-how and build a network. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answers. I think exchange and communication are key, be it in person or in virtual. I hope that foreign missions in Korea will work with the Korean government in order to make a platform for exchange and cooperation. Now, I would like to ask some questions to Director General Kim Sung-kyu. I have two questions about diplomacy. First question is, what will be some of the key areas you believe more cooperation is needed next year? So, Mr. Kim, please.
일단은 분야를 불문하고
Regardless of the areas of cooperation,
팬데믹이 조금 컨트롤 가능한 상황이 되면
if the pandemic situation is stabilized,
금년보다
we are going to increase in-person diplomacy efforts,
만드는데
and we will make sure that the proper foundation is made to that end.
분야와 관련해서는
Around the world, we are seeing both competition and cooperation in developing high technology. Korea and many other countries around the world are actively developing high technologies such as bio, aerospace, and AI. A lot of activities are happening in Korea, and we always are seeking partners for such cooperation. In December this year, we are going to announce key strategic technologies to be promoted. Director Chung Hee-kwon, sitting next to me, will be the person making the announcement. And the plan will also include our plans for international cooperation. We hope to see more active cooperation with other countries in the area of high technology. At the same time, Korea is known for its good capability for developing applied science or applied technology, but there is a long way to go in terms of basic science or basic science research. Of course, it is important to provide more financial support for domestic research, but at the same time, we have to participate in the global research network to share knowledge and learn from others. So next year, we will actively pursue international cooperation in the area of basic science and basic research. And in order to support joint projects approved by the Joint Committee for Scientific and Technological Cooperation, we will make sure that we secure sufficient amount of budget. And as was already introduced during my presentation, we are going to launch the Brain Link project. Thank you very much for your answer. So, all those participants watching us live, please kindly consider the new ways of cooperation in high-tech area. This is the second question to you. When implementing science and ICT diplomacy, I believe cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is important. What kind of support programs do you have to this end? When I was explaining the ministry policies, I talked about the appointment of the Ambassador for Science, Technology and Innovation. The ambassador is appointed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, the competent authority for ICT cooperation is the Ministry of Science and ICT. So the ministry will have close collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as with the ambassadors. We expect the ambassador to have close communication with the private sector experts at home and abroad. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs have 40 overseas missions selected as hubs for science and ICT cooperation. These 40 overseas missions will make efforts in order to strengthen cooperation in the area of science and ICT. In these overseas missions, there will be many activities And the Ministry of Science and ICT will provide necessary information for the activities conducted by these overseas missions. So we do already have close collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 2019, we worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to establish the cooperation strategies, and we also have the Director General level policy dialogue. And next year, we're going to open up ministerial level policy dialogue so that we will have different levels of communication between the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we already have a communication channel between the two ministries. So we expect a lot of active cooperation between the two ministries. Thank you very much for your kind answers. So that was the end of the Q&A session. During the presentation session, I understand some of the participants experienced some technical problems.